If you picked up a paper that hot June afternoon, you might see the following ads. Eureka, Eureka, Excelsior, the washer most complete without exception, the most labor-saving washing machine made. Price, $8. That wasn't really what caught the eye of the three Confederate generals looking at the paper. What caught their eye was the next one. R.F. McElhaney Store. Boots and shoes, man's Burmels, man's Wellington boots, men's brogans. Now that caught their eye, and strongly. Ambrose Hill, Henry Heth, and Johnston Pettigrew. Heth told Pettigrew, why don't you go into town with your men and get those shoes. Get those shoes. Seems like a simple request, doesn't it? Especially when Mr. Pettigrew had 2,400 men to go shopping. However, that's not the way it exactly turned out, as we will see. But let's go to what you might call the first self-deception. You see, the big thing for us, and for that time too, is that we're willing to deceive ourselves. You always have to be willing to do that to become deceived. Let's go to Genesis 3:6. When the woman saw the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable to make one wise, she took some of it and ate it. She gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Now I want you to notice what she saw. She saw the fruit was good for food, although they were told not to eat it. Boy, that particular moment, it looked wonderful. It was desirable for wisdom. Now, is there any one of us who wouldn't like to be a little wiser? Sounds good. She was setting herself up. Let's look at that, Patriarchs and Prophets, page 54. Now look carefully at the words. On perceiving she was alone, she felt an apprehension of danger, but what? Dismissed it. Deciding she was sufficiently wise and strong enough to discern evil and to withstand it. Unmindful of the angel's caution, she soon found herself gazing with mingled curiosity and admiration upon the forbidden tree. Now let's put this in modern thought. I am a big girl, and I can stand on my own 2 feet. I don't need Adam to assist me. Now, let's not blame Eve particularly for that, because we're all guilty of that in one way or another through our years. I'm big enough to know what is right and wrong, and I'm big enough to know when I'm going to be scammed. I can see it full length. I don't have to worry about this. And besides, I'll recognize the enemy if he's there. Recognize the enemy. If you study the spirit of prophecy, you will find that Adam and Eve had this idea that they might meet a beautiful being of dazzling brightness, an angel, something like that. They were prepared for that kind of occasion. But they weren't prepared for a talking serpent. I'm a big girl. I can take care of myself. Now, when she answered the serpent, she said, "We are not to eat it," but she added something. "We are not to touch it." Now, I'm not sure if God had said that or not, but you don't find it recorded in the Word. Go back to Genesis 2. He said nothing about touching it. So when the serpent put the fruit in her hand and she didn't drop over dead, that added to the point of, God must have told me a lie. She set herself up to become upset, deceived. I've been deceived many times. I'm willing to say so. There's another thing to it. So have all of us. You know, the easy, tender payments. I talk about debt a lot because it bothers me a lot. Easy, tender payments. Just sign here. And we are deceived. They soon do not become easy, and they are definitely not tender. Let's look at Proverbs 9:17. Stolen water is sweet, food eaten in secret is delicious. Have you ever done something you really knew you weren't smart to do it, but you did it? And you got away with it. I like to go out on the fort and drive four wheels. And Thursday, I found myself on a really abandoned road. This road had not been driven in years. So, I drove it until I got to the top of the hill, and then I looked down the hill. Oh boy. I could back up, yet I had stopped early enough. But I decided to take the plunge. You ever done anything like that? Have you decided to, well, I'll just go ahead anyway. Well, fortunately, gravity's on my side, so I got down fine. But you get this feeling of elation. I succeeded. I got away with it. But you know, you can do that once too often and find out it doesn't work that way. Stolen water is sweet for a while, but it becomes bitter in the mouth. There is a thrill. We step out on a limb, and then there's a horror as the limb snaps. Let's go to Joshua 9. Notice this one. This is an interesting story. I think you're familiar with it. And they answered, "Your servants, I've come from a very far country because of the fame of the Lord your God. For we have heard reports of him all that he had done or did in Egypt. Isn't that an interesting opening for a deception? We're going to pull the Lord in to give this a better taste. Let's go forward. They answered, okay. And our elders and all those living in our country said to us, take provisions for your journey. Go and meet them and say to them, we are your servants. Make a treaty with us. This bread was ours, was warm when we packed it at home on the day we left to come to you. But now, see how dry and moldy it is. And these wineskins, they were filled with new wine. But see now, they're cracked. And our clothes and our sandals are worn out from the very long journey. Aha. And did you see the last part of that statement? And the Israelites sampled their provisions. They looked at the mold. They looked at the cracked shoes. They looked at the broken wineskins, but they did not what? Inquire of the Lord. Moldy bread, cracked shoes, but they did not inquire of the Lord. I have been guilty of that. Perhaps you have too. It's so easy to deceive ourselves. Let's go to the next one. Numbers 22. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth and said to Balaam, what have I done to you, to make you beat me these 3 times? Balaam answered the donkey, you have made a fool of me. And if only I had a sword in my hand, I'd kill you right now. A talking donkey. I've talked about this a lot. Now, I talk to my cat every once in a while, pet him. He says, meow. That's it. But what if he answered me back? What if we had a conversation? That would make me back up pretty quick. How did I get in a situation where I'm having a conversation with the animal? Well, there's a reason for the conversation here. Let's go to the next slide. Notice, Balaam was once a good man and a prophet of God, but he had apostatized. He had given himself up to covetousness, yet he still professed to be a servant of the Most High. He was not ignorant of God's work in behalf of Israel, and when the messengers announced their errand, he well knew, notice, he well knew what was his duty to refuse the rewards of Balak and dismiss the ambassadors. And now the next point. But he ventured to dally with temptation. Ventured to dally with temptation, and what did he get for his dallying? A conversation with a donkey. If he had not dallied with the temptation, the donkey incident would not have occurred. He knew he should tell them to get lost. But he got lost. Balaam died in the battle against the Israelites. The sword that he planned for the donkey, he received. But notice why. He said, stay overnight. Very simple. Seems reasonable. Stay overnight. But it was a tragic end. How quickly we can take something simple and turn it into something that's a tragedy because of our choices, because we have decided to be deceived. Joshua 7, verse 21. When I saw the plunder, a beautiful robe from Babylonia, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them, and I took them. When he saw, he took his eyes off Jesus. He took his eyes off Joshua's leading and what Joshua told them to do and not to do. He put his eyes on gold, silver, and a beautiful robe. We're very familiar with the story. He is confessing now because he's cornered, not because he's sorry. There's a great difference. It's the same thing with Judas. I'm confessing now because I have done a terrible deed. That's right. And so, had this event happened, I have chosen to look a different way, to bring riches to my home and my hearth. Let's look at 2 Corinthians 3:18. And we all, who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, being transformed into his image, with every increasing glory which comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. I want you to take a look. You'll see the picture. The man is looking in the mirror, but the person in the mirror is not the glory of the Lord. He's a hideous monster. Why? Because by beholding we become changed. Things that should have been evil are no longer evil. We put them in a different light. We behold them. And we are changed into the evil's likeness as well. This beholding works both ways. So the question needs to be asked, where am I looking? What am I beholding? Genesis 27. This is a very interesting story. We're very familiar with it from the standpoint of Jacob's deceit. Let's look a little closer. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." "Here am I," he answered. Next slide. "I am an old man, and I don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your equipment, your quiver, and your bow, and go out to the open country and hunt some wild game for me. Prepare for me the kind of tasty food I like, and bring it to me to eat, and I will give you my blessing before I die." Sounds halfway reasonable, but if you really look at the story, you will find that Isaac was absolutely adamant that Esau would receive the birthright. You look at Isaac's life, and it looks pretty good. It looks like he's walking with the Lord. But all of us have flaws, and Isaac has one too, and it's his stubbornness that's going to lead to the deception. Without his stubbornness, this would not have happened. Let's go to the next slide. I want you to notice something here from Patriarchs and Prophets. Promises made to Abraham and confirmed to his son were held by Isaac and Rebekah as the great object of their desires and hopes. Well, all these promises, Esau and Jacob were familiar. They were taught to regard the birthright as a matter of great importance, for it included not only the inheritance of worldly wealth, but spiritual preeminence. He who received it would be the priest of his family, in the line of posterity with the Redeemer of the world to come. On the other hand, there were obligations resting upon the possessor of the birthright. He should inherit its blessings, must devote his life to the service of God. Like Abraham, he must be obedient to the divine requirements. In marriage, in his family relation, in public life, he must consult the will of God. Esau didn't mind that one sentence where it says he would receive his family's goods. But the rest of it he did not want. In fact, he lived without any interest in it. He, in fact, sold it for a bowl of soup or pottage. That's how much he thought of the spiritual point of view. Esau committed the unpardonable sin. You may read that in Hebrews, the 12th chapter. Now, notice there's two people who are stubborn. Isaac is stubborn to make sure his eldest son gets it when the Lord said no. You got to give something here to Esau. He was just stubborn, he didn't want it. This led to some real trouble. Self-deception. Let's go to the next slide. Now, watch this one. Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up, eat some of my game, so that you may give me your blessing. Isaac asked his son, how did you find it so quickly, my son? Notice, the Lord your God gave me success. Jacob wants the blessing so much. In fact, he wants the spiritual side, not so much the other side. But he's willing to pull the Lord into the deception. Your Lord has given me success. Now, how many of us have done something similar in this account? Why, the whole thing just fell into place. I wanted to buy this XYZ and I wasn't sure if it was right, but all the tables just sat, all the chairs just sat right in a perfect circle. I know the Lord wanted me to do this. It's the same as Jacob. Have we inquired of the Lord? As in the time of Joshua, we have not. Or maybe we did a couple quick prayers and then, well, what do you know? What an opportunity. This must be from the Lord. Your enemy and my enemy can rearrange the chairs just fine. We can find ourselves in a real pickle, thinking the Lord has put us there. And then when things get tight, we wonder why in the world it seems like the Lord left us. He put us in this place and now he's left. No, he didn't put us there. we deceived ourselves into believing we got an okay, just like Jacob. Patriarchs and prophets. Esau had violated one of the conditions of the covenant, which forbade intermarriage between the chosen people and the heathen. Yet Isaac was still unshaken in his determination to bestow upon him the birthright. The reasoning of Rebekah and Jacob's strong desire for the blessing and Esau's indifference to its obligations had no effect on changing the father's purpose. If you read deeper in Patriarchs and Prophets, you'll find that when he asked Esau to get him that game for the meal, he did it in secret. He didn't do it in front of the other two people. He did it with Esau alone. Rebekah overheard. She had a suspicion. And it goes from there. How easy we deceive ourselves. I think back and I shudder at some of the choices I made, and I had to pay for it, of course. There's nothing free in this world. Don't let anybody tell you that your education is free, or this is free, or that is free. It does not exist. So therefore, we all pay. Let's reflect a little more. Next slide. Notice what Isaiah said about his people. Stubborn Israel, listen to this, you descendants of Jacob. Aha! You've been called by the name of Israel. Come from the line of Judah, you who take oaths in the name of the Lord, invoke the God of Israel, but not in truth or righteousness. For I know how stubborn you were, and still are, I could inject. Your neck muscles are iron, and your forehead is bronze. That man is sticking out his tongue. By the way, he's a church member. It says the people of Israel, the tribe of Judah, he's a church member. And he thinks he's in good condition before the Lord. But he's actually sticking his tongue out at him. Is it possible I could do that? It's scary to think so. Ellen White says something very beautiful, very terrifying. I'm sorry I made that mistake. He says, we can change captains and not even know it. That's thought-provoking. We need to check the regiment that we're really in. Well, they decided to get the shoes. The day was hot, and the town was 8 miles away. So Johnston Pettigrew, and 2,400 men, I guess you really want some shoes, went, and if they went in, it was going to be nonstop. The store people were not going to be able to stop 2,400 men from looting a shoe store. Yet they came back absolutely empty. Not one pair of shoes. 16 miles in sizzling heat for nothing. Hill and Heth did not understand. Where are the shoes? Well, Pettigrew explained, he met a small force of Union cavalry on the north side of town and was rather concerned. He didn't know if there was any more or not. And if there was more, he didn't want to get into trouble at that point. And so he turned around, 8 more brutal miles in the heat and barefoot, and he did not get the shoes. Let's go to 2 Timothy 4:10. For Demas, because he loved this world, has deserted me, and he's gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, and Titus to Dalmatia. Now the latter two people were sent there by Paul, but Demas has decided to go. Notice he's a man turning his back on eternity with God. He's running the other way. And we say to ourselves, we would never make such a disastrous choice as that. But let's take a look. Next slide. Demas, steadfast for a time, afterwards forsook the cause of Christ. In referring to this, Paul wrote, Demas has forsaken me, and having loved this present world. For worldly gain, Demas bartered every high and noble consideration. How short-sighted the exchange! Possessing only worldly wealth or honor, Demas was poor indeed, however much he might proudly call his own, while Mark, choosing to suffer for Christ's sake, possessed eternal riches, being accounted in heaven an heir of God and a joint heir with his Son. Oh, we say, we would never fall for that. This world is not worth that. I can say from this point of view in time in my life, I certainly feel the world is not worth it. But I didn't always feel that way. You know, when you're younger and you want to get your first home, your first car. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a car and a house, but we center on what we're interested in at that time. But as the years go by, you begin to see how uninteresting they really are. Like, for instance, they'll say, oh, Ken, you need to buy this home. Look at the view. You can see forever. But there's another concern. After 2 or 3 years, or maybe even before that, I'll stop looking out the window. It's just, I've seen it every day. It's no big deal. But it was the big reason why the house cost so much, because I could see forever. And after a while, it means absolutely nothing, especially if I've got to dig a ditch or mow the lawn or, you know, it doesn't mean anything. Until I want to sell the house. And then what do I say? Look at the view. Yeah, that's probably what happened to him as he looked at the view. There was thickening clouds, there was difficulty, there was danger. He forsook the apostle. When we forsake someone, we affect more than we know. When we don't stand by under tight circumstances, we upset the apple cart. The damage goes way beyond ourselves. Ezekiel 33:31. My people come to you as they usually do, and they sit before you to hear your words, but they do not put them into practice. Their mouths speak of love, out of their hearts for unjust gain. They're greedy for unjust gain. Greedy for unjust gain. It's serious, but we keep thinking, I've got to get all this money out of this. When I sell this, I'm going to sell it for a real high price because I need the money. You know? I'm not questioning the need for money, but the question is in that statement, who's really preserving you? The money you get or the Lord Himself? Doesn't mean you give it away, but on the other hand, it's very easy to follow the world's pattern and say, it's what the market will bear. We justify it. Luke 12:15. Then He said to them, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. A lot of you know that I like to read. I built up a reasonable library. It's not really that big, but it's reasonable. And it's far bigger than I needed. But I had such good bargains. You know, instead of paying $30 for this book, I got it for $6.95. How many books can you read? One day I looked at the library and said, you know, this is insane. It's good to have good books. It's good to read. But to what extent? We need to say that about all the things that we can possibly choose to buy. Do you really need this? Now I'm going to be stepping on maybe some toes, but I think we need to think clearly. Have you noticed in some of these storage places, by the way, the storage big business is now bigger than McDonald's, Wendy's, and Burger King combined. Storage. Storage for what? Well, from the world, heaven's standpoint, it's storage to be burned. But look at it carefully. You buy or rent this small cubicle for a pretty good price each month. And then if you have an RV, you can park it there for additional money. An RV that costs you, say, $75,000 and gets you 8 miles to the gallon. That's a lot of money. And it's in storage. You're not even driving it. But you may be making payments on it. You're certainly paying for the storage. We need to understand that we do not need what the world offers. Isaiah 5:20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter, who turn right and wrong upside down. That's what it's saying. Imagine what some of the laws we have today. They allow a lot of things that you and I would have never considered. But for those who say that these are wrong, you can have a fine or a jail term. We've turned things upside down. What's wrong is right, and what's right is wrong. Is it confusing? It certainly is. You can't rely on your government to help you in the future. They've got everything twisted. The problem is it's easy for us to join the twisting. Exodus 23:2. Don't follow a crowd in doing wrong. I like to think of the myth, I get it as a myth, about lemmings every 3 or 4 or 5 years marching into the Arctic Ocean. But we are lemmings. We follow a crowd. How easy is it for you or I to stand up in a crowd and say, this is wrong? The majority of us, including myself perhaps, wouldn't stand up. We'd sit there and squirm and hope the moment would pass. Matthew 4:8 and 9. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. All this I will give you, he said, if you bow down and worship me. Ha, we say, oh, we'd never fall for that one. No, we probably won't. Because with us, including myself, that's not where Lucifer is going to start. He's going to start at a far lower point. And we might fall for that. He's not going to say, Ken, if you'll just follow me, I'll give you the world. No, Ken, if you follow me, I will give you something much smaller, but in my eyes, something good. We sell so easy. Proverbs 14:12. There's a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof is the ways of death. Why is the broad road so acceptable? I've been on a number of trails in the mountains. Some were broad, and a lot of people were there. I've gotten on some very narrow trails, and there were a few people there. And then I left the trails. And except for the other people that were with me, there was nobody there. Why? Very simple if you look at the picture. There's a cross. The narrow road has a cross. The broad road does not. And who wants to carry a cross? Only a few. So, what is it? What choices are we going to make? Are we going to deceive ourselves? Is it because the cross is too much and the elevation of the trail too hard? General Hill said, really you don't have anything to worry about. There's nobody here but us. Even General Lee says with confidence, there's no Yankees in the area. So tomorrow, let's go to town. Let's get those shoes. General Hess said, well, Pettigrew tried today and it didn't work. Can I go in tomorrow with my division? It'll be so easy. They deceived themselves. There were more Yankees in the area than they could ever imagine. It led to a 3-day battle and 43,000 casualties. It started over shoes. It's called Gettysburg.